Okay. All right. Welcome, everybody. I am Audrey Siegel. I'm the Executive Director of Beaker Holm of Greater Washington. And I'm honored today, actually, to represent the organization and welcome all of you to this program titled Navigating the Mental Health Landscape with Amudim. We're very excited to introduce Amudim to our local community. And as you'll learn, it's a wonderful organization and it serves people all over. As an organization, Beaker Holm of Greater Washington provides comprehensive support to hundreds of people and caregivers in the local DMV area, as well as to those who travel to our region for medical treatment. Last month alone, we provided assistance to over 138 individuals, offering unique, tailored support to meet their needs. To learn more about our free programs and services, please visit our website, which I will share shortly in the chat. I want to take a moment before we get started with the program today to spotlight two of Beaker Holm of Greater Washington programs. The first is called Me'ir La'olam, which means bringer of light to the world in Hebrew. This program operates kosher Beaker Holm rooms in 5 area hospital campuses, providing essential support to families in need. We consistently receive messages from grateful individuals who have discovered these rooms, but many people are unaware of their existence until they need them. As such, I encourage each of you to help spread the word that Beaker Holm of Greater Washington rooms are available at Children's National Medical Center, Shady Grove Adventist Hospital, White Oak Adventist Hospital, Holy Cross Silver Spring Campus, and the Children's Inn at the National Institutes of Health. These rooms are fully stocked with food and comfort items and are a tremendous resource for anyone who finds themselves in the hospital as a patient or with a loved one. The second Beaker Holm of Greater Washington program is the reason we are all here today. Throughout the year, Beaker Holm of Greater Washington presents both virtual and in-person programming on health-related topics, often collaborating with other organizations to spread their message and connect members of our community with valuable resources. Today's program, which focuses on navigating the mental health landscape, is especially relevant to Beaker Holm of Greater Washington's work in the community. Our educational program has made us strong advocates for mental health. And through the Ben's Wellness Fund, which you'll hear more about shortly, we offer micro grants to help people pay their mental health bills. The program with Amudim today is part of a year-long series that highlights different mental health topics. I would like to remind everyone that Beaker Holm of Greater Washington is not endorsing any particular type of therapy and that all information you'll hear is meant to be general and not specific to any one person. We'll be hearing from 4 wonderful speakers. Ben's Wellness founder, Leah Scheininger, Rabbi Tzvi Gluck, CEO of Amudim, who I recently heard has unfortunately been under the weather, but he's going to do our best to still come through and do some, share some thoughts about Amudim this morning, and Rabbi Avi Landa, Director of Education at Amudim, and our local therapist, Emma Lash, who is also co-hosting this morning. Leah will speak in a few moments on a personal note, followed by Rabbi Gluck, Rabbi Landa, and then Emma Lash. Before introducing Leah, I want to give special thanks to Esti Schonbrunn for helping put this program together. Esti, you are awesome. And I'd like to thank Amudim for the work they do and for being so flexible about the scheduling of today's program. And to Emma Lash for not only speaking today, but for also co-hosting the Zoom and helping out with technicalities. There will be time for questions at the end of the program, and valuable information will not only go in the chat, but will be emailed to everybody who registered after the program is over. Maybe give us a day or 2 to get that to you. Without further ado, I would now like to introduce Leah Scheininger.
Great, can everyone hear me? Yeah?
Yeah.
Great, perfect. Something's acting a little funny on my screen, but I guess I'll just, Yeah, I guess I'll just go, assuming everyone else can hear me and see me, even though my screen's
Yeah.
fighting. Okay, fine. I don't know why my screen's doing that, but okay, fine. I'll speak anyway. Okay. So hi everyone. Um, so when Beaker Holim actually first asked me if I wanted to speak about what therapy has done for me on a personal level and other people that I know, the person asking me, who Audrey mentioned, Esty, when she asked me, she gave me an immediate back out. She said, she told me, she said, let me know if your response is heck no, or if you're open to it. So my immediate response was heck no. I'm not going to stand. Initially, this program was supposed to be in public, so I like in person. So I said, I'm not going to stand up in front of people in public and be vulnerable and tell them how I and people I know have benefited from therapy. Like, why would I do that? And as I was in the middle of texting her back that exact heck no, something inside of me kind of did a reframe. And I said to myself, wait a minute, like if I could be vulnerable and human and tell people what therapy has done for me and for what people has done for me and people that I love and care about, maybe I could help some others. And maybe I could help some others in overcoming the stigma that comes with therapy and show how it has really saved lives and significantly given me and others tools for life. So I thought about it more, and here I am. I do want to preface this talk. It was that explaining that again, this program has kind of been postponed a few different times. I actually initially wrote the words before October 7th, and then we weren't even sure if it was definitely happening after October 7th. And as I said, there were some conflicts. And then again, afterwards, after October 7th, Esty asked me again if I was like, well, if I was willing to do it. And I hesitated again um, because I had finally gotten comfortable sharing some personal details in order to encourage others to go to therapy. But then my problems kind of felt a little bit trivial after everything that was going on. Um, compared to what we're all dealing with on a national level. So obviously we are all connected and we all know someone who is either fighting or someone who knows someone who has died al Kiddush Hashem in this war. And it's really shocked all of our systems. And clearly we all feel the pain. So I kind of was hesitant. And then again, I did another reframe and I said, yes, my problems might seem trivial to October 7th, but there has never been a more important time for us and our community and the Jewish nation at large to need mental health services and to find ways of healing from these atrocities. So here I am. I'm going to just kind of start out on a personal level, and speak about my background a little bit. So, um, and just a little bit about some of my life experiences. So I grew up in a very loving home in Denver, Colorado, with a strong Jewish identity, but very little Jewish observance. And I began traditional Torah observance, and I began exploring and keeping a Torah lifestyle when I was 19, when I was abroad in Israel for the year after high school in a volunteer study program. Eventually, I made my way back to the States, and due to my new observance level, I changed my college plans and decided to study at Stern College. Well, I'm so grateful for my experiences at Stern College in New York City. It was a huge lifestyle, religious, and cultural adjustment. I was kind of used to the quiet, slow-paced mountains of Colorado, and then I moved to a dorm on 34th Street with three women from very different backgrounds than me. And I went from being a really good student at public high school to being thrown into a double curriculum with Hebrew and Judaic studies with girls that had come from yeshiva backgrounds that had a double curriculum since kindergarten. And many of them had known each other from previous years from schools and camps and seminaries, where I was kind of coming with alone with altruistic, simplistic, non-material convictions and barely knowing another soul. Additionally, felt like I was kind of thrown into this pressure cooker for dating and getting married. I was only 20 years old, and it was not something that I had planned on from growing up with kind of a different background and value system in Colorado. Needless to say, with all these adjustments and kind of giving into the dating pressures, I experienced a broken engagement. And from all those things, I really benefited from working with a therapist to discuss some of these lifestyle changes, um, and integrating different parts of myself into a healthy young frum woman, and learning about myself, current and future relationships from my broken engagement. Well, I did benefit so much from these therapy sessions. I remember going through the counseling process in a very private way, not wanting others to know about my Wednesday sessions in Brooklyn, because why would I ever tell anyone about them? This was clearly something that I needed to do due to my unique circumstances. And I felt like I was the only person in Stern College and probably the whole world who needed therapy. And then one day I heard the president of Stern at the time, President Richard Joel, say something that made me feel human. He remarked that he wanted us Stern women to know that we are all so different and come from such different backgrounds, but he wanted us to know that it's normal during the stage of life, in our early adulthood, or really any time, to be going through challenges, and how important it is to find someone to speak to about these challenges, whether it's a therapist, a life coach, a rabbi, teacher, mentor. And just hearing him acknowledge that we all go through challenges and the importance of getting help made me feel validated in what I was doing, and maybe I wasn't the only one going through difficulties. Within the next couple of years, I started meeting others who needed help. One friend, let's call her Sarah, chose to confide in me that she had been sexually molested as a child and how she had never told a soul. And the fear, pain, and darkness of the problem haunted her daily and nightly, and she could never move on. I tried and tried to get her into therapy, and for the longest time, she refused due to stigma, her cultural background, and many other reasons. And finally, with Hashem's help, I got her to see someone. Not only did it heal her and help her to move on, it helped her so much that she actually changed her career field and decided to become a social worker so she could help others the same way that a therapist saved her life. Another friend, let's call her Hannah, opened up to me and told me that she had been so depressed for so many years that she often injured herself and constantly thought about suicide. Her relationship with her parents was poor, and the idea of finding therapy was embarrassing to her and unaffordable. After many, many, many talks and finding ways to financially back her therapy, she went. And Baruch Hashem, to this day, she is a different person. She still struggles with mental health, but she is aware of herself, her needs, and she still sees a therapist weekly, just like some of us go to the gym weekly in order to keep ourselves healthy. I could go on and on about individuals that I know where professional help has made them into stronger, healthier people. But there are other people speaking and other things to do today. So, Baruch Hashem, I think our community and the world at large has grown so much in our mental health awareness, and the stigma that comes along with therapy has improved, and Emirat Hashem will continue to. The accessibility and affordability to mental health care is something that still needs improvement. And that is one of the reasons why I started Ben's Wellness Fund. And I'm so fortunate to be Bikur Cholim of Greater Washington for partnering with me to make it a reality. So when I lost my brother, Ben, Alav Shalom, about a year and a half ago, I wanted to do something for his neshama that would help others and that would support a cause that he cared about. Ben had a caring soul that wanted to help others, and he believed strongly in getting proper access to mental health care, no matter how much it cost. He was aware that many people wouldn't get the mental health care they needed due to affordability, and that's why I decided to start Ben's Wellness Fund. This fund, which is managed and run by Bikur Cholim, is a fund allotted to help people get the best mental health care needed without the extra burden of figuring out how they can pay for it if they aren't able to. As a community, if we knew someone needed a specialized treatment for a rare type of cancer, or someone needed help to pay for a surgery on their leg that was out of their insurance network, we would help them find the means to do so and help them to get the best oncologist or the best surgeon, no matter the cost. So too, this needs to be our perspective with mental health. Many therapists and many health professionals are out of network and incredibly expensive. Rather than asking for help, people won't go because they view mental health as something different than a physical ailment, and they are sometimes too embarrassed or convince themselves that it's not as important, when really their life can be at stake just as much as the person with cancer. So So I urge us today to view mental health in the same light as we view our physical health and to encourage ourselves and others to get the professional help when it's needed, no matter the cost. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Leah, thank you. I really am glad that you went from heck no to heck yes. I don't think that anyone could have said it um, or shared what you had to share better. So it's really with deep appreciation to you and to Esti for reaching out to you. I wanted to say before introducing our next speakers from Amudim, I wanted to just follow up on what Leah said about the Ben Wellness Fund. I'm going to put some information in the chat, but as I said, it also will also send that information after the program to everybody who's registered. And you can always find it by going to the Beaker Home of Greater Washington website. And you look under our services tab. You can either find or scroll down. You'll find one of our services is called Ben's Wellness Fund. There's information there about the fund and also how to access it. It is also possible to donate to Ben's Wellness Fund to help support. And money that goes to Ben's Wellness Fund is used to pay for mental health therapies. And you can donate directly to the fund as well. I'll send information about that later. So I'm going to put that into the chat in just a moment. But right now, I would like to, with great excitement and anticipation, turn our program over to Rabbi Gluck and Rabbi Landa of Amudim.
Hi, good morning, everybody. First of all, Leah, that was really nice and brave of you to share the way you shared it. And I could say, as before I jump into what we do, as someone who has been fighting the tide and trying to address various issues, I say a big thank you for not only sharing, but for stepping up and doing, actually taking it, taking an approach and actually doing something as opposed to just, talking about it. So I want to start with that. Before I begin, I just want to tell everyone I apologize. My computer screen is on an angle, and if I am looking at the screen, I'm not looking at the people. So if it looks like my eyes are shifting, it's just because I can't look at two places at once. So it's not because I'm playing any board games or online games. I am here, I'm present, and I apologize. If it looks differently. And thank you to Bikur Cholim and to everybody, and apologies for all the back and forth and the changes and the cancellations and the rescheduling and everything, but we are here today. My name is Tzvi Gluck. I'm the co-founder of Amudim along with Mendy Klein, from Cleveland, as well as Moshe Wolfson from Farakoi. I could say the quick background to why we did what we did, at least from my perspective, is when I was 19 years old, I had two friends of mine that passed away back to back. One of them committed suicide after leaving an entire dossier about the sexual abuse that he had gone through when he was younger. And the other friend of mine died in a car accident while he was high on drugs. Those were my first two real introductions into exactly, a lot of the things that we started seeing. When we initially founded Amudim, the purpose was very, very single focused. It was to remove the stigma associated with people not being willing to get help that were victims of sexual abuse. By way of introduction, before that, I had volunteered, which I actually still do because my blood is still in there. But I volunteered for Our Place in Brooklyn. That was the first, I guess, mental health area that I actually stepped into. And that was very, very amazing. But then when we realized a lot of the linkage between those that have suffered a serious trauma, because it shifted quickly just from sexual abuse, but traumas in general, realizing that there was something else that was needed. Very quickly, we started getting calls for actual services. Here we were putting out conferences, PSA videos, just to generate awareness, and it turned into something much bigger than that. So we did two major pivots. One was we started dealing with people that have all sorts of mental health related issues. Obviously, the primary focus still remaining sexual abuse, as well as all sorts of addictions. The second pivot was that as opposed to just doing awareness, we started what we called comprehensive clinical case management, which is where we've hired therapists that were managing the care for those that were coming to us for help. So just to make that clear, they were not, well, they're still not. They're not actually providing the treatment, but they are managing every aspect that is related to the person getting the help that they need, as well as what we call other affected individuals, spouses, siblings, parents, children, etc. The reason for that was that we found a very, very big difference when people were reaching out and they were speaking to someone who didn't have a mental health background versus someone that did, and actually being able to get the assistance that they needed in a much healthier and quicker fashion, I'll say, for lack of a better word. So we ended up bringing on therapists, and that's the way it's been ever since. Before we get to that specific, so we have staff in 5 different states in the United States. We have physical offices in Israel and in the US. We actually have a clinic in Israel as well. The office in Israel was initially started to help seminary girls and yeshiva students, that many of them were not able to access the help that they desperately needed for a variety of reasons. Whatever those reasons could be, really the most common that we saw was they were victims of abuse from a family member or a close family friend and never felt comfortable sharing it. And we realized that if we can get them the help they need, before they get married, we can possibly help save their marriages and reduce the number of divorces, etc., which was what led to that opening as well. In addition to the case management, we also, and this is something that maybe I should get some tips from everybody at Bikur Cholim how to do this, but we have a therapy subsidy fund that assists in paying for people who can't afford therapy. It was specifically set up for those that were victims of sexual abuse. And the fund, it covers up to $100 per session in 6-month increments for up to a year. So the reason why I say I need some advice is because raising money has been very, very difficult, especially now. So if you guys know some tricks of the trade that you're able to raise money, I'd love to take some of those ideas. That fund we put out about $2 million a year just from that fund alone. It is all over the world, so it's not limited by region. The only requirements that we have is that we're not the First National Bank of Amudim, which means we're providing that in addition to services. So if somebody is receiving case management and they need further assistance, then that is another thing that we can offer. We are not there to it's not our mission is just to give out money. We also need to make sure that the therapists are actually trauma trained, licensed, and approved. We have a clinical advisory board, and we always make sure that anybody that we are assisting, we try to do this for anybody that we refer to in general, even under case management. That's a little bit more difficult. But anybody that we're assisting financially, we want to make sure that they're getting the proper care from the proper person. In addition, because of treatment in general being so cost prohibitive, we invested in building our own platform similar to the Chesed Fund or GoFundMe. The reason why we built our own is because this way all donations can be tax deductible when people donate to the cause for those that need help, without having to run around to find a shul that you could link the Chesed Fund to, that they can get a tax receipt when they make a donation, etc. And also it's because people felt that there was a certain trust there if the funds were going through an organization. But the main thing with that is that because it is tax deductible, that means the monies can only be used for legal purposes. That is approved by the IRS. So if somebody, if we can raise $30,000 from the platform and the person says, I really need a vacation with my family can I use that money? The answer is no. Not because we don't think you need a vacation, but that money can only go for what is within Amudim's charter as approved by the IRS based on when we apply to be a nonprofit. So it's for clinical treatment, medical treatment, educational components, how some basic necessities, expenses in the home, etc. So that's the fund that we manage. We field a few hundred calls a day. Not everyone that calls us either calls to become a client, and not everyone that calls is calling for things specific. Very often we get calls, ideas, advice. From the client perspective, a big portion of our calls are anonymous for a variety of reasons. As much as I am proud to say that we have made so much progress in the field of mental health in the last 10 years, that we've been open, we're still light years ahead of where we need to be. The stigma is still very much there. I proudly share this whenever I speak publicly. I go to therapy every week. I see a psychiatrist once a month. I probably should have started earlier. That's a separate discussion. And it's something that I'm proud of, and it's something that I probably should have done many, many years earlier. I speak about it publicly all the time, not for any specific. I mean, even if there was nothing I was dealing with, just the work itself is extremely, traumatic. So that's something, that we are still very much dealing with. As far as the third component is our education and awareness component. So after I finish, I'm going to have Rabbi Landa speak more detailed about some of the educational pieces. But on the awareness part, we've put out 8 PSA videos. Each of them have won literally hundreds of awards, industry awards, which we're very proud of. If anyone hasn't seen them, I strongly suggest you do. They are extremely powerful. I would have a box of tissues next to you. I still tear up when I watch the videos that we've produced. So I've seen them throughout production, and it's still very hard-hitting. But that is our style. It is hard-hitting. We're not looking to sugarcoat anything. There was a very big debate in the beginning, which way we should go. And this was something that I put up a fight for. And I said, listen, if we don't put it out there right away and let people really feel what's going on and feel it through what we're putting out, we're just wasting our time. We're just doing another feel-good, component. So we've done that. We've also do a lot of awareness events. We've currently in New York City, we're the second largest distributor of Narcan kits to reverse opioid overdoses. The first largest is the New York City Office of Mental Health, the city agency. So this is something that we're also very proud of. And just to take away some confusion, Amudim is not a travel agency. A lot of people like to mix different things that we've been involved in over the years, whether it was during COVID, getting people into Israel, whether it was, when the war started, dealing with planes or cargo flights. My philosophy as a person is if somebody has a talent to do something and the world needs help, everyone has an obligation to step up. Why we did so under Amudim was not meant to be. It was just my email address is at Amudim, and they call my phone, it's Amudim, so it just became Amudim, even though we had separate staff that we brought in just to handle those things. But for purposes of clarity, our main mission is abuse, addiction, and mental health issues. However, our real main mission is crisis management for anyone who needs help in the community. So if there's a specific need that needs to be stepped up and assisted with, we will obviously do what we can. Avi, should I go over some of the questions, just to answer some of those?
Hi, Rabbi Gluck.
Yep.
Okay, Rabbi Landa, should I take that? The questions that we got, we're going to take those at the end to see who.
Oh.
But I have a question that I would love. Could you speak for just a couple of minutes about the case management role? What does that look like?
Sure.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay. So the theory that I have is that organizations don't help people. Yes, I just said that. Organizations don't help people. I run an organization with over 60 employees and a $10.5 million a year budget. But organizations don't help people. People help people. Anytime somebody contacts any organization, no matter how good they are, it's always the person that they're communicating with that is given that ability and that responsibility to provide assistance. In realizing this early on, we realized that referrals are extremely important. I want to make that very clear, okay? Case management is not here to take away from referrals. But we have found that if I really need help and the person that's helping me is guiding me step by step and there for me when I slip or when I need an extra boost, that is going to be that magical potion of the difference between successful treatment for mental health related issues or non-successful treatment. Me, myself, it took me a long time till I found a therapist that was the right one. But if I would have had somebody that would have spoken to me every week or every 2 weeks for the first few months, they might have realized right away, wait, this is not working. It's like a shut up. It's not working. Let's find somebody else. And that was where we came out with the idea of what we've considered case management, which is as follows. The case manager's job, besides for being a clinician, a mental health professional, is to A, make all affected people feel comfortable with what is going to be needed and what the process is going to be. Whatever the area might be, if it's a hospitalization, if it's a detox, if it's standard talk therapy, if there's going to be some sort of trauma intensive program, whatever it might be. And the reason for that is very often the people that are going for therapy do not know what's about to hit them. The people around them certainly have no idea, especially when dealing with trauma-focused work. So it's extremely important that let's say for argument's sake, it's a spouse, right? We have a 35-year-old male who decided that they're now going to go to therapy because they were abused when they were 13. Just giving an example. By the way, the bulk of our clients that are survivors of sexual abuse are coming to us when they are around the same age that they're currently having children at. And now that the children are the same age that they were when they were abused is what's getting them to start reaching out for help. So you're talking about there could be a 20, 30-year gap between what had happened and when they've gone to help. Very often their spouses don't even know what's about to hit them. So being able to have a case manager explain to the spouse, this is what's happening, this is how it's going to be. Now I say this is in every area because someone's going to a detox, someone's going to a rehab, someone's going to a trauma-focused inpatient treatment. What are they to expect? What's going to happen? What should they be aware of? So that's one major component. The other major component of case management is, like I mentioned about myself, having somebody who can speak to the person every week for the first 4 to 6 weeks that we're dealing with them, right? Making sure that everything is working. If it's not working, being able to immediately pivot and say, hey, we got to find another strategy. Whether it's another therapist, whether it's a different program, whether it's a different modality, right? That's another reason why it was important that we have therapists do this work. Because, we get calls all the time about different treatment modalities. I'm not a clinician. I'm not going to say what we do or don't agree with, but I will say that, okay, I do put my foot down by certain types of treatment that are non-proven not to work, or that have other risk factors that can cause people to go into bits of suicidality based on the type of treatment that was done. And there are certain things, these are not your traditional treatments that are done by most licensed professionals or programs, but a lot of these are people that are out of the box, no clinical experience, etc. But these are things you have to be very careful of. The other thing is, very often if we're dealing with somebody who's going in for treatment, there's going to be financial burdens in the home. How did the schools find out? You got to pay tuition, right? You got to deal with grocery bills. Now, it might sound silly that like an Amudim case manager is going to try to figure out who's the local grocery that we can get a discount or even them to sponsor food for 2 months for a family. But that's just as much a part of the healing process as anything else. Or having to reach out to the schools. Now, again, that's a catch-22. We're still dealing with the stigma. So they'll be like, wait, you can't tell my kids' schools that this is happening but at the same time, you can't afford to pay tuition for the next few months. So, the primary breadwinner, or in most families that we deal with today, it takes two working parents. If, you can usually use more than that to actually pay the bills. But the other component is also, it's also a way to create a teachable moment. Because by letting, I say this all the time, when we have kids that are getting help, the schools have to know about it. Not so much for the reasons everybody thinks, but I'm going to give a very basic reason. If my kid doesn't take his medicine in the morning and goes to school and starts acting out, imagine if I reach out to this teacher before and say, listen, my son ran out of the house today, he did not take his meds. It changes the entire focus if he starts acting out in class. Instead of it being trouble, there's an understanding. So for us, it's always important that we get the parents to understand, or whatever it might be, siblings, it doesn't matter, that the other affected parties need to know about it. It will only assist in not only the help for this person, but it will getting help for others. So we try to always utilize that as well. And the other component is when we need to deal with communal rabbis, rabbanim. So we do have somebody on staff who has smicha, who is a postic, who's also very involved with Rabbi Land on the education side, who's a both mental health professional, Rav, former principal of mainstream schools, at-risk schools, etc. So he's very well-rounded. And the Rav of Amudim, Rav Elia Brudny, has made it very officially and formally known that anything that this person says should be used in his name. Meaning, if he says, but a lot of those issues come up, Shabbos, Kafris, treatment, something as basic as, I get a call, we have a 24-hour, even though we're not 24-hour response, we're not like emergency, like EMS, but we do answer the phones 24 hours, 7 days a week, just because you never know what's going to come in. And, not too long ago, we got a call on a Friday night, and this girl was crying on the phone saying, I need to watch TV, I need to do something in my own room, and my father's yelling and screaming at me, and et cetera, trying to explain, again, I'm not giving a blanket talk right now. It's not what I'm doing here, but trying to explain to these families there are halachic guidances that allow for A, B, C, and D. And again, when the case manager is the one that is dealing with all these different pieces, both the direct and indirect, peripheral, and what you can clearly see right away, all of a sudden, it makes it easier, and there's also a relationship. The other key component to our version of case management is long before COVID, we were doing this remote. And that was by design. Because we wanted that if a case manager bumps into a client, there's no awkwardness. They might know each other. They might. But it's very different than, especially, again, I'm not going to say that we were expecting to have, close to 4,000 active clients, at any one given time. That was never, an expectation. I mean, it's very, interesting how things really just grew, but we always knew it would be a decent amount. And we wanted to make sure that the people that were reaching out for help would have the least possible resistance to getting the help that they needed. So having someone on the other end of the phone communicating not face-to-face, again, we're not advocating for therapy not face-to-face. We'll make that very clear. And again, this is long before COVID. But we were advocating for getting the help that they need. And speaking to someone on the phone allowed a much better method to be able to access the specific assistance needed without having a fear of any of those stigmas.
Well, thank you. That really does, answer the question. And I hope I speak for many of us that we all just really learned a lot. And that case management piece of what you do is so valuable and unique. With your permission, then, Rabbi Gluck, I'm going to turn it over to Rabbi Landa, who would also like to say a few words. And after Rabbi Landa, we're going to hear from a local therapist, Emma Lash. And then we have some questions that were submitted in advance. We're going to try to get through those first, but we will try and stay on so that people in the room can ask questions as well. Rabbi Landa.
Thank you so much, and thank you to Bikur Cholim of Greater Washington for hosting this event. And it's a real pleasure and privilege to be here with everyone. I want to start by echoing Rabbi Tzvi Gluck's statements regarding Leah. Thank you so much for sharing your story. It is incredible bravery for you to share it like this, and it seems like you might have shared it in the past. I'm not sure, but the fact that you did it here in this forum is really encouraging for the trends that I've seen personally Amudim be a part of in terms of making a difference amongst all the communities and really bringing things in the right direction to be able to talk about these things publicly and get everyone the help that they need. So thank you so much. Okay, and thank you, Tzvi, for elaborating on really the core components of what Amudim can offer, really all the communities, especially all the Jewish communities worldwide. And I hope that you all take advantage of it. I'm just going to post Amudim's website there in the chat for everyone to take a look. It's a very user-friendly website and really lays out all the different services. The piece that I want to focus on as Director of Education is the educational component of the branch of Amudim. It's, as Tzvi Gluck often says, as the CEO of Amudim, that if we do our job right, hopefully, with Siyata Dishmaya, the educational department of Amudim will put the rest of Amudim out of business. The idea is really prevention. It's for us to be able to teach already younger children, as well as educate parents and adults in what are the healthy ways and practices, what are the things to be aware of and the signs to look out for, and what are really things for us to be thinking about and to be inculcating within our lives so that we prevent a lot of these issues from happening in the first place. So I want to actually share some resources with you just briefly that we have out there that are currently public. Before I do so, there is a sort of crown jewel in the educational department of Amudim, and that is a comprehensive evidence-based social emotional learning curriculum. Social emotional learning is a very popular curriculum out there in the world in general, and Amudim is very proud to have a from the ground up, specially built for the Jewish community across all spectrums, from the most left to the right wing and everything in between, called Our Path SEL and Darchenu. And Darchenu is an Our Path SEL. It is this made for the Jewish community social emotional learning curriculum that has many tailor-made classes for the teachers to be trained in and to be able to deliver these classes and presentations in the schools to the students, often on a weekly basis. And we are proud to be in almost 100 schools now. Actually, internationally, we have a few schools outside of the United States, mostly in the United States, and it's received tremendous feedback. We're in about our 4th year now of providing this curriculum. So I encourage everyone, we'll put in the chat afterwards the website to take a look at that curriculum as well. And it's accessible through the Amudim website as well when you go through look through the educational supplemental materials and tools that Amudim is offering. One of the publicly already accessible materials that I want to spotlight and highlight is actually at darchenu.org right now. You all can go and get that. I'm going to share my screen just to give you a little taste. So what you should be seeing now is a snapshot of one of our tools. This is designed in the exact structure of our Darchenu curriculum, the social emotional learning curriculum. Oftentimes there will be many sessions here depicting all the different classes that can be 30-minute, 40-minute long classes. This one was obviously specifically made to help teachers be able to discuss, process, and educate on how should we deal with what happened in Eretz Yisrael, October 7th. And as you can see, it's very well laid out what the objectives of the class are. There's an introduction, there's a note to teachers, and then step 1, step 2, step 3, and we talk about exactly the emotions that can come up. We normalize those emotions across the spectrum. We give coping mechanisms and deal with that specifically. And this really only piggybacks on all of the other classes that we have specific to emotions, coping with our emotions, awareness of our emotions, relationships, values, friendships, then getting into project-specific topics after that foundation is built, like bullying and technology and substance abuse and other types of boundary crossings. So I just wanted to give you this, allows you to just get a taste for what the classes look like. There are attachments that can be given out and can be submitted. I myself did this. I'm personally located in Baltimore. I did this in TA in Baltimore with the classes, and it was very enlightening. I gave this worksheet out to the students. They wrote down some things, and then they were able to circle, and some of them circled, yes, I would like to speak more about it. And I was able to call them in and talk to them one-on-one about what some of their feelings were. And that's something that Darchenu provides as well. It allows us to be able to have a teacher in the class that's a part of the school that's trained by Darchenu to have new points of intervention with their students, whether it's a guidance counselor, a mechaneches, a mashgiach, an assistant principal, a popular teacher, whoever it is, they have this new point of intervention to be able to work one-on-one with the kids and discover issues that they may have not discovered in the past. Sometimes issues like poverty, issues like some sort of boundary crossings going on in the home, or other types of potential stressors, bullying in school, out of school, that allows us to then intervene as a school. And they always have the Darchenu staff, the Our Path SEL staff, to be able to consult with and get guidance on. That's one resource. The second I want to just highlight is actually a booklet that is on healthy boundaries, a safety talk with our preteen and teenage children. This is again all of our materials, by the way, are endorsed by the Vad Rashi Yeshiva of Torah Masorah under the Darchenu name, and everything's reviewed by Rav Hillel David and Rav Elia Brudny. This is a booklet, again, an extensive booklet with how should we deal with, how should we educate and have a talk. There are many materials out there, Baruch Shem, for the Jewish community when it comes to younger children. Pretty rare to find those that are specific for preteen and teenage children, where we need to get kind of to the next level on these topics. And this is a long and lengthy resource that's extensive, that allows parents and educators to have a starting point of information and guidance. The last resource I want to highlight here is Discussing Delicate Current Events with Our Children, Strategies and Hashkafa. This came out after one of the more difficult situations that came out with the whole Walder situation and all of his books, and how to deal with all of that, and how to understand the news that was coming out. But basically, when unfortunately it has been applied in multiple additional pieces of current events that have come out since then, and it's something that is a critical tool for, again, parents and educators to be able to talk to their children. It's designed to give both a younger child approach as well as, again, a teenage child approach to these topics. So these are various tools that I just wanted to highlight that are available right now at darchenu.org. I'm going to post the website in the chat for in a minute. And there, under curriculum resources, you can get all three of these resources for free, publicly available right now as a supplemental parental resource to the general Darchenu Our Path SEL curriculum that we offer. In addition, we offer various awareness and educational events in person and over Zoom, like we're doing right now. And so this is, once again, a great privilege for us to be able to speak about Amudim and all the educational and prevention opportunities and tools that we have to offer. And Audrey, was there something that anything that you wanted to ask me on anything I said so far, anything that wasn't clear?
Oh, I think you've been very clear. Thank you.
Okay, great.
And again, everybody else will have an opportunity to ask questions at the end.
Sure. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. That was wonderful. Much appreciated. All right. In a moment, we are going to turn it over to a local therapist, give it a little bit of a local flavor, to Emma Lash. And before we do that, though, I want to just, sometimes if you leave things to the end, forget to say them. So I want to make sure that I say before we get to the end that our next educational program will be what I consider mental health adjacent. It is going to be on Zoom on February 25th. It will be the second in a series we are doing with the organization Ematai. This talk will be with Rabbi Shlomo Brody, and it will be on halachic advanced directives. Some of you had joined us last Sunday when we talked about writing legacy letters. And on the end of the month, we'll be talking about advanced directives, a bit more of the practical ins and outs of how one can approach that. I say it's mental health adjacent because a lot of sometimes other stresses that we have in our lives is sometimes thinking about the future and making plans. And the more that we can take control over those kind of things to the extent that's possible, that can also contribute to well-being and mental health. So thank you for letting me get that in for the end. And now I'd like to introduce Emma Lash. Emma?
Hello. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for logging on. What I know, is a busy time, usually on Sunday mornings. I wanted to obviously first thank Leah Scheininger for her vulnerability, Audrey for just all the work that you do, for Bikur Cholim and on behalf of Bikur Cholim, and we've been just answering calls right up to the, to the time of the start of this program. It's just incredible to hear. And obviously to Rabbi Gluck, Rabbi Landa for just, the incredible passion, education, and, one-on-one support that they do, and, and then Amudim does. I was inspired just hearing, kind of all that you had to share. So today I'm going to talk about, after you go through the therapist, kind of finding a therapist process, or you are in that process, how to really make sure that it is a good fit. As Rabbi Glock so beautifully said, right? People help people. It is often, once we're finally in the room, a one-on-one. If there's family members involved, one on two or three or however many, relationship. And that's what we really like to think about from a therapist perspective. That's kind of what I'm going to speak about, what I have found, personally, myself, with clients, with friends and acquaintances, really how to get yourself to a place where you can feel empowered to find the therapist that fits and works for you. Again, as Rabbi Gluck said, that's a huge part of what Amudim does and is very necessary, very incredible. And so just kind of reflecting that work. And then also, if you aren't working directly with Amudim, you don't necessarily have a direct caseworker, how to kind of assess that for yourself. So I'll just introduce myself. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. I've been working in this field for about 8 years now. I studied locally at the University of Maryland, both for undergrad and my graduate work. I have worked with individuals, couples, families, children, parents, kind of all of the different makeups of families and people who would need support with various issues. And I currently am a therapist, and I own my own practice called New Ways Family Therapy, and I practice right here in Silver Spring. I currently am only working with adult individuals and couples, but hope to in the future get back to more of the family work, because that is also a passion of mine. So again, the first goal, first task really of therapy, if you are starting on this journey, is to make sure you're with a therapist that works for you. Now, therapists can come highly recommended by friends and family members and even organizations, and each person is different. Each therapist is different. Each client is different. So really trying to figure out how can you have that right fit, that dynamic relationship. As I said, that's really what it is. And that can be a little bit of a process to figure out. Some people come right in and they say, I want this, I want this, I want this. And that's fantastic. And some people don't know that, that what they need. So I have kind of developed a couple of questions to help you really try and think about that, either for yourself or if you're helping someone else trying to access therapy, trying to find a therapist. Questions you can also reflect to them. And I'll say, again, also as Rabbi Gluck reflected, you don't always end up long term with the first therapist that you meet, and that's for a number of reasons. Like we said, each person is different, each client is different, and each person needs something a little bit different. So also therapists know this. We are trained and we are experienced in assessing the fit. That is something we talk often about in our training, in our schooling, is just how do you know, if a client is going to work for you, if you're going to work for a client, and it's an ongoing process. We try very hard not to take it personally. I personally try very hard to have an open conversation around that. If someone's saying, hey, I don't know if this is working, or, this style or something is more what I'm looking for, really trying to have a conversation about that. And this is essential in the first few sessions. Again, as the service Amudim provides, they said, first 4 to 6 weeks, 4 to 6 sessions, really trying to figure out if that's what is working. So I've outlined a couple of questions, broken it down into questions you can ask yourself to really kind of try and understand what is it that is important to you, right? When you're wanting to kind of enter into a therapeutic relationship, right? You're starting therapy either for the first time or for the 10th time, because it changes. You are can become such a different person over different parts of your life, different, depending on what's going on. So what you liked, and what you found helpful when you were 25 may not work now that you're 55 or whatever it is. So we'll have questions to ask yourself, and then I'll get into questions to ask a therapist. So as I said, really trying to think about what is important to you and how do you know this? How do you know this? You can have had previous experiences in therapy, asking yourself, thinking about what worked, what didn't work, what did you really enjoy that the therapist did, whether it was the way that they talked, the pace of discussion, certain questions they asked you, certain interventions that they gave you, if they helped you, kind of figure out different emotions. And if that felt really helpful, like I just said, things do change over time. So you also want to kind of ask yourself, and does that still apply? Is that something I want to mention, whether it was therapy a year ago or therapy 5 years ago, is that something I want to mention to the therapist now that you're starting with, that would be something you'd be hoping to experience with them. Also on the same kind of level, what didn't work, right? If you had a therapist that you felt was not really asking the questions you wanted really for them to ask. But some people come to find that they need a lot more encouragement, or they need more direct questioning. Some people like to just kind of free associate and just kind of talk. And when they get interrupted by that, it doesn't feel so good. So that's also something to think about, is just, as we said, previous experiences in therapy, did the therapist talk too much, not enough, helpful questions, unhelpful questions. And again, for you as a person, what is important to you? I will say, if you did not have previous experiences in therapy, because that is very common, think about what are your experiences in life, right? So what are your, kind of what is a value of yours? Who do you find that you go and confide in? A spouse, a friend, a sibling, a Rav, right? Who in your life do you generally kind of gravitate towards seeking advice from, or just talking through something that's frustrating or really big? As Leah so beautifully shared, this friend of hers, shared a very big thing that had happened to her, and knowing the person that Leah is, I'm not surprised that she felt comfortable to do that. So you also want to kind of think about why, when you think about the person you confide in, why is that? Is it because they, again, really let you talk? They let you kind of feel whatever emotions you do. They don't shut you down. They don't say, oh, don't worry about it, it'll get better. Oh, this is just a phase. Sometimes it might not be, right? So if that doesn't feel helpful for you, that's also something to kind of reflect on and let the therapist know. Help them to understand that about yourself. You first understand about yourself, and then let the therapist know. So that's, the first thing is kind of what's important to you as a whole person. The second question you really want to ask yourself is, what are the goals of your therapy experience? This is usually often, already expressed, whether, when you're working with Amudim, whether it is with a caseworker, that's one of the first questions, I imagine they're going to ask. What are your goals for therapy? Not necessarily, in addition to why you're coming to therapy, because sometimes it's just a general, I want to feel a little bit better. I want to feel a bit more excited about my life. So what are the goals of therapy? So even if it has already been discussed or written down in a form or on a website, submission, really to kind of take that time and think for yourself, what do I want to get out of this? So that looks like, as Rabbi Gluck, mentioned, there's different modalities, right? And that can affect therapy. Different therapists have different models that they use. Some are more integrative, meaning they pull from, from a few, or, from specific ones, and kind of integrate those interventions and theories into the work. Some are very kind of purist and really stick to more, kind of the traditional process of that therapy. So that's important also to kind of ask yourself. As an example, cognitive behavioral therapy, which many people have heard about and is, one of the most common, does look very different in the therapy room than maybe a more kind of what we call like process oriented, more of an open-ended, kind of what's going on, what are you feeling in your body, more kind of integrative therapy. So that's also something to think about. And as you'll see when I get to the questions to ask a therapist, something you can directly ask is, what modalities do the therapists use? And how does that sit with you? If you have done a certain one before and hey, I didn't actually like this so much, or I was uncomfortable with that, how can you express that, right? And maybe talk a little about why that was so uncomfortable. And would you want to try it again or try something different? And again, this depends on the goals of therapy. Are you coming to make kind of, I wouldn't say quick change, but just a specific change, right? You're wanting to try, teenagers wanting to like really help with focusing on homework. The modality of that might look different than if you're really processing, like we said, something from 20, 30 years ago could look different. And then you're also wanting to see, as we said before, within the modality, some are a little bit more directive, some are a little bit more kind of, you're challenged a little bit more to like, okay, well, how maybe could you make that step towards change? And some are not as are not as challenged, and each person is going to need something different. This is all to say, you might not know until you try, which again, as Rabbi Gluck said, it is so essential why we're continuously kind of wanting to follow up, either with the case manager or just with yourself or with the therapist, about what's working, especially in the first couple of weeks as we're getting to kind of build that relationship. As with Shidduchim, right? First couple of dates, you're really trying to figure out, is this someone I can kind of really see myself with? So on a therapist, obviously more professional level, but yeah. And the last question to ask yourself is, similarly along that track, are you getting what you need, right? Is just the practicalities, is the time that you're meeting working for you? Maybe you signed up for, a 9:15 slot, and you're finding every day that like you're not getting home from carpool until actually like 9:20, or you're rushing, or you're stressed on the way, or the kid doesn't get out of the house, and that's actually causing a lot more anxiety. So really trying to assess, is the time working for you? Maybe you need an afternoon session, maybe you need an evening session, right? Therapists try and offer a range, obviously based on their own commitments and things. But time is an important thing, and frequency, right? Usually therapists will start out meeting once a week with clients. If you feel like you need to bump that up to twice a week because things are just kind of either really in crisis, or you're really just having a hard time, someone's having a hard time working through through on a daily basis, right? How to also know if that's something you need. And then again, more the process of therapy, meaning, if there is growth happening, does the pace of the growth feel okay, or does it feel uncomfortable? Do you find yourself dreading, oh gosh, I gotta, meet with so-and-so at 3 o'clock today. Like, I don't really want to do that. Maybe that's because you as the client are feeling a little bit rushed or not enough, right? Maybe you're frustrated with the pace of the session. So that's also something to assess. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're the wrong therapist for you. It just might mean that it's something you'll need to talk about. And then kind of connected to that is, on getting what you need, is how safe do you feel expressing what it is that you need to that therapist? Is there an intimidation there? For some reason, do you not feel so comfortable, right? And again, something to bring up with a case manager or just kind of on your own, how to actually really kind of assess, like, this is not working, and I might need to switch, right? So there's some kind of more questions in there, but I'll pause just for that kind of overview. And now just a couple questions to ask the therapist, right? So that was kind of what you can ask yourself. And this is what you want to ask a therapist, or what you could ask a therapist. And again, on the same, general theme of my talk right now, is ask them about what is important to you, right? If where they went to school is important to you, You can ask that. Interviewing the therapist is what we call it. It's something I encourage my clients to do when I'm first meeting with them. I say, do you have any questions for me? Are you curious about anything about me or the way I practice? And either I'll do that, on a kind of a consultation, like a introductory call, or we'll do that in the first session. Whatever they want to know, obviously within limits of, kind of personal information. I really encourage them to ask these questions. So some of this might look like, how did the therapist get started working with this particular population, this particular community, or this particular issue, right? And again, they don't have to go into if there's a personal connection to it, but just what is their experience? Have you ever worked with someone like me before? Is a question I've heard many times. And the therapist, to their best of their ability, they want to be honest, and they want to say either yes, or no, and, I'm willing to try. And some people are okay with that. Some people really want, kind of much more closer fit, and we'll get to that in a second as well. But yeah, being able to ask those questions of a therapist. Similarly, practicalities, right? How does a therapist deal with flexibility of scheduling? Oh my goodness, this work meeting popped up. What is the cancellation policy? Again, kind of the drier things within the therapy process, but still important to ask if it's important to you. If you work in an environment where things pop up, with a 20-minute notice, and your therapist has a 24-hour cancellation policy, which is pretty common. How do they handle that, right? What is the fee for that? Usually that is in, the paperwork, but sometimes we can miss that. So to have a direct kind of conversation, whether it is about fees, as we've been talking about and acknowledging, the cost of therapy is very high, and can be a factor in whether someone wants to move forward with a certain therapist or not, whether they're insurance-based, private pay-based. So also kind of asking whether, if the therapist doesn't directly offer, a lower rate, what organizations, right? What, what do they know, or how can they kind of what can they suggest to help you maybe offset that cost? And if they don't know, can you explore that together? And then again, similarly, as we said, their approach, what modalities do they use? Again, the modalities can look similar, they can also look very different. And asking also the question, not just what modality they use, but what does this look like practically? Like for the next couple of sessions, like what are we actually going to do? And you can ask that question, and the therapist, can, to the best, as we said, the best of their knowledge and ability, kind of spell that out for you, and also ask you, is that something you're comfortable with? And if not, how come, or what can we kind of do with that? And then two quick last points I'll make, so we definitely have time for questions, is, what do they understand about relevant factors in your life? I'll say this is a question I get the most from friends, from acquaintances, when they're looking for a therapist. Should I find a frum therapist? Should I find just a Jewish therapist? Should I find a not Jewish therapist? And again, I come back to that question of what's important for you. Think about yourself. Think about how the therapy can look. If you don't want to be explaining certain terms or, halachic implications, whatever. If you're not the type of person that wants to be doing that, maybe someone who is more familiar with that would be a better fit. If you don't mind, and it's not going to throw you off in the middle of a session talking about, a certain experience, then okay, that's something to know. And you can ask, to ask the therapist, what do you know about XYZ? What do you know about, Shabbos, not things like that. If it's something that's relevant to you, if the issue you're trying to get help with, does have more to do with that, again, maybe someone who is knowledgeable in that, and obviously, trained and licensed and everything, um, could be a better fit for some people. They really don't want connection to someone in the community, and that is okay to say. That is to be respected. And so, I have people that I recommend who are totally outside the community, and some people want that. And then the last point I'll wrap with is something to consider, and this is something on the therapist end we consider, and the client's end we consider, and as Rabbi Clark mentioned as well, right, that there can be a lot of crossover if someone is seeing someone from the community, even if, someone's here in, Silver Spring and we're seeing a clinician in Baltimore, right? Who knows? Like there could be a Simcha, there could be overlap, there could be, someone, every so often I go up to 7 Mile for shopping, right? Like I could potentially see a client of mine in public. So you also kind of want to have that conversation. And I will say that usually this, is and would be brought up by the therapist as well. But just this idea of like, how do you handle, you to ask the therapist, how do you handle that in public? Most therapists, pretty much everyone I know, basically says general rule is they do not acknowledge you unless you acknowledge them. Some people might get very excited to see their therapist in public. I've had, children clients I've seen just walking around and they wave and okay, so I'll wave back, right? I'm not going to ignore them because again, it is a relationship, but we don't know for whatever reason. Someone might not want to be, in the canned vegetable aisle of the grocery store and someone says, oh, who are you talking to? Oh, there's my therapist, right? Like there's sensitivities. Each person has their sensitivities. So to respect that. So again, coming back to how important is that to you and how uncomfortable or comfortable would you feel and how to talk about that. We have just a couple schools here. So chances are you might or might not see someone. And it's okay, again, as we said, that you want to see someone completely outside the community, or if you're feeling more comfortable inside, how do you kind of deal with that? So that's I'll wrap it up.
Yeah.
That is basically encouraging people to take the time to ask themselves these questions. Sometimes you're very quickly thrown into the therapeutic process, finding a therapist and really wanting to kind of see whether you're already matched, whether you're just starting, or whether you've been seeing this person for a while and something's kind of not really working so well. There's some things that you can ask. So we'll,
Thank you, Emma.
yeah.
Thank you. Oh, that was wonderful. Really
Yeah.
appreciate it. And I really appreciate how you really, I would say, gave permission or empower people to ask questions of somebody.
Yeah.
Nobody has to feel like they are starting a therapeutic relationship and need to just take direction from the therapist. They certainly, in the way, I couldn't say it any better than you did. And I love those practical tips about the types of questions that you could ask. We are going to, in the time remaining, we are just going to pivot to questions in just a minute. There were some questions that were submitted in advance, and then you're welcome to submit some questions in the chat as well. And those questions will be presented anonymously. Your name will not be associated with the question that you ask. Of course, we are going to ask the questions remain general. Nobody can actually give therapy in a session like this. So these would have to be more general questions. And I'll read a couple from the chat. So or not from the chat rather, but from the ones that were submitted in advance. So you'll get a sense of some of the questions that we've received. I'll actually start with a question for the group, and you can, maybe any of our panelists today can raise your hands in the chat if you're ready to answer it first. So somebody submitted the following question. What kind of therapies are available for children who shut down when asked questions they don't want to answer? I think that's something people come up against a lot. So is there, do we have?
I'm happy to
Emma,
answer.
you ready? Okay, please. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'll do it quickly because I just spoke a lot. The first thing to understand, it's a very common question. And I'm assuming that this question was submitted by an adult, because when we think about therapy, we do traditionally think about talk therapy. It's what we might most be comfortable with as an adult. So the very first thing to understand is that a child's language is play. Whether they are 3 or 10 or even a little bit beyond, right? And really until the middle school, high school years, we don't see on a developmental level so much of gravitation towards talk. So that is just quick and easy. First thing to start is to know that that's very common and actually probably expected. They're going to shut down. They don't have the language, they don't have the kind of cognitive processes to really think through or express what is going on. Even if a child is very verbal or very communicative, that's amazing and definitely can help get you a little bit further. But really, when we're thinking about therapies and interventions, it is going to most likely than not be play-based. So that's either Non-directive, meaning it's child-led, child's in a room full of all different types of things with a therapist, and the therapist is really just kind of following what the child needs, and talk about, they're not saying, hey, you're coming in because, your parents are going through a divorce. They're just saying, oh, look at that bouncy ball over there, and the child says, yes, I want to play with that today. Okay, it's just that space to kind of, and then whatever conversation happens naturally. Then there's directive, which is more of, hey, this is what we are going to do today in the play space. So whether that's using sand tray, whether that's using board games or Legos. I had a child I saw during COVID when the schools were going back in person, and he was very nervous about what was going to happen at school, different protocols, checking temperatures, having to wash hands, not being able to use a water fountain. And we built a school out of Legos, not a huge thing, but we built and it was over Zoom. So I built a school and he built a school, and we used that to talk through. We used the little Lego minifigure and said, you're going to get out of the car. Let's move the figure to the front door. And through that, we were able to talk about, his feelings around that at each stage, at each step, and what he wanted to do about that, right? Who he could go to and trust with that. And then there's there's therapies where their parent is actually involved, a little bit more common for younger kids. There's TheraPlay, which is one of the names, and then there's parent-child interaction therapy. And again, that involves the parent and the children in the room, really focusing on the relationship. And this is, again, helpful for general kind of concerns with children's emotions or behaviors or specific issues. But yeah, it is going to be play.
Beautiful. Thank you. That's a great response. Did anybody else have anything to say about that? Rabbi Lynn? Okay. All right. The next question is slightly more specific. It is, I'll broaden the answer a little bit, but the question specifically was, are there any grants available specifically for children who are on the autism spectrum or maybe a different disability? I'm going to.
I can.
Yeah, you can take that, and then I'll add something on the local level. Go ahead, Rabbi Black, please.
So as far as grant, that's a very, very tricky word. We actually are currently in the middle of a joint program through the federal government with a developmentally disability huge conglomerate, specifically to try to figure out mental health care and needs in that community. As far as grants, we don't know of any on a grant level, but we do know of various local organizations in different parts of the country, as well as a lot of the organizations that deal with those issues should have, again, I can't speak for every community, but should have access to mental health care specifically regarding for the clientele in need. It's a much more complex area. It's much more specialized. I can tell you from the abuse side, it's a much higher risk for abuse and much harder to provide therapy. Very often people are not as talkative or not as verbal or not able to express the same way as others. So it does make it very, very tricky. But the other thing that we have seen is even in places where there are no grants or there aren't, funding, people that very often will go through, let's say, a clinic that deals with insurance or has, various things, might be able to find someone, even if it's not to them specifically. So it's hard to find, and people do have to look extra. I mean, again, that's obviously part of what we would try to do if we're helping, is to find the right person. But from a grant perspective, as far as grants properly are concerned, not that we know of. If there are and anyone else knows of them, let us know, because we do get that question pretty common.
Yeah, I'm sure. Thank you. That was very helpful. I'll say on the local level, the Ben's Wellness Fund is open to people in our area exclusively, in the DMV. So that is also, of course, includes people with intellectual disabilities, physical disabilities on the autism spectrum. And the person who asked that question should definitely reach out to us. I also wanted to put it up, as Rabbi Gluck said, there are often local resources. So in our area, Kennedy Krieger is in Baltimore, and they specifically have departments that work with children with autism and intellectual disabilities as well. and they do take insurance. They're insurance-based, and they also take Medicaid, which is very valuable. And they're very highly regarded. They're associated with Johns Hopkins, so it's a top-notch facility. There is a waiting list often, but I'm going to just put it in the chat. And the person who asked the question, if they haven't done so already, might want to reach out to them and get on that waiting list, or possibly not have to be on a waiting list. So that's a local resource. Okay, next in our questions, let's see. So we also had a question, is there a local place for therapeutic animals that a child can visit if having a pet is not feasible for a family? Emma, I think you had something about that. Am I right?
Yeah, yeah. So I haven't worked directly with therapeutic animals, animal therapy, but just to give a little bit of knowledge, I'll say equine therapy, so horses, canine therapy, dogs, and a little bit more up and coming is what they call caprine therapy, which is goats, mini goats or whatever. That's usually the three kind of animals that are have been used for therapy. I'll say in this general area, I did a quick Google search. I was able to find two. One is a little bit more north of Baltimore. One is out by Annapolis. They tend to be in a little bit more rural areas. So, I'm not going to go into DC and find like a pet shop to do that. But it is something that has been found to be very, very helpful, especially with motion regulation, responsibility things. So these two specifically, I'm happy. I was just about to put their websites in the chat as well. Again, the person who asked this question, happy to kind of talk a little bit more. There's also, if needed, there's more residential programs that are, I don't know of any in this area, but certainly upstate New York, where the person actually stays for, 2 to 3 weeks at a time. But it is valuable. It's a very, kind of very valuable way if that is something that child connects with or a person connects with.
Yeah, beautiful. And I would also just add that not in a therapeutic model, but as Rabbi Gluck said before, Amudim and certainly locally Beaker Home of Greater Washington support people in a variety of ways. And that could also include connecting you with a volunteer that has an animal that's been trained to do visits. We'd be happy to do that. So if you want to reach out to us through that way, that's another way that you can potentially maybe fill that need. We have a question in the chat, which is important. It says, our society could be a hostile place for LGBTQ and youth and adults. Do your services address this and help people with mental health who identify as LGBTQ and are struggling with these questions? I'll answer on behalf of Beaker Home of Greater Washington, and then I'll let Amudim handle that question on from their perspective. So firstly, mental health is mental health. And as I said in answer to the question about Ben's wellness in terms of autism, it's the same exact thing. If there are people LGBTQ or anything else who need help with mental health resources, they should reach out to us. We can see what we can do. There's no distinction made based on what the challenges that people have are. Secondly, we ran a program that might be useful to some people a few months ago with an organization called Kesher Families. I'll put them in the chat. And they are having a Shabbaton. Again, this is not directly answering that question, but I'm going to send that information to all the people that attended that program. That program was a live program. We did not have a recording. And they're going to be having a Shabbaton that's going to deal with a lot of mental health and wellness issues around these issues. So, Amudim, did you have anything you wanted to add to that, either Rabbi Lanz or Rabbi Gluck?
Absolutely. Amudim is an organization that deals with mental health primarily. We're not a religious center. Make that very clear. Yes, we have a rabbi for Psak Halacha for things that pertain to us as staff, but not for our client base. Anybody that needs assistance, regardless of what it might be, is 100% going to get whatever help we can possibly assist with. We are not going to get involved in any of their lifestyle choices. We make that very clearly. At the end of the day, it's all about getting people the proper help. So we are not judging anyone based on any orientation or things of that nature. Again, we're also not going to be expected the other direction. In other words, it was sort of attempted to be demanded upon us that if we are truly there for the LGBT community, then we should be marching in the Pride Parade as an organization. And I said, no, there's two different things. There's one is people coming to us for help, and two is us, doing something that's not within our purview. So there is a very fine line. So just because we're not, marching doesn't mean we're not there to help people. But we will help anyone who comes up to help, and we do have many, many, many clients that we're dealing with in this category. Very often it's younger people, so it's dealing more with their parents than with them on the clinical side, but this is something that is common. As far as cashier families, we're actually very close with them. One of our employees was given on loan to them to help them when they were starting, and now she's with them pretty much full time. They do amazing work in this space. It was started by a good friend of mine from my neighborhood who now moved out, as well as his son and my son went to the same, schools up until 9th grade. And they're an amazing resource specifically for those dealing with the LGBT community within the FROM framework. So I will just second Audrey's comment on that they're a great resource.
Okay, thank you so much, Rabbi Gluck. We have one more question in the chat that I think we could address, and maybe Rabbi Landa, you might be the best person for this, you could see. But somebody asked if they have a child who's in therapy and the school does not want the child to talk about it, how can they address that?
Okay, just to clarify, the school does not want...
I'll read the question that's in the chat. It says, what do you think about a child who's in therapy and her school doesn't want to talk about it to her friends?
I'm sorry, I don't want to do this, Rabbi Landa. You can answer because you're a mental health professional and an educator. I would like to know who from the school said that so I can have a personal face-to-face meeting with that person and explain to them that what they're doing is directly impacting any ability for mental health to assist. To me, and again, that's me being the rough Zvi-Glocke, to me, this is a teachable moment. This is a teachable moment of educating the school as to what they're doing and how they need to be more destigmatized in the concept of therapy. Now, the question will be worded differently of what if a person is in therapy and the school doesn't want them to discuss the specifics of what is going on in therapy? That's a very different question. So again, not discussing therapy, or if a child, God forbid, was abused and the school's like, listen, we understand you're in therapy, but we don't want you to, we don't want your child to discuss the situation that led to the therapy with other classmates of them. That can be very different. And even in that case, it has to be dealt with very, very delicately, because the last thing anyone needs is to tell a child, here, you have to go to therapy, but you can't talk about it, which is basically taking away the ability for that therapy to ever work. So that's my answer. Rabbi Land, I'm sorry.
No, I agree with everything you said. I was gonna make that same distinction. I think that's an important distinction. The fact that a child is in therapy is something that I think teachers and principals can embrace and can publicize to their school body. I don't think that's something to be ashamed of. I think that we have multiple people here on this presentation today that made that very clear, and things maybe would have been better in situations where we were willing to be more frontal about it and willing to talk about it and not cause unintentional consequences of stigmatizing it, actually. So what would you do practically with that school? What I would say is that, generally speaking, and I deal with schools a lot, is if you just come at it from your perspective, then the school tends to shut down in those communication channels. But if you begin by telling the school, listen, I hear where you're coming from. You probably don't want these specifics to come out. You don't want conversations about maybe suicidality and severe levels of depression to be spoken about at recess amongst the kids. Some kids are not thinking about those things, and that's not what their parents want them to be thinking about during recess, and to be considering that one of their friends is suicidal and all that. And I get that, and I'm going to talk to my son or my daughter about that, and we're going to make sure that recess conversation is recess conversation. But can you allow that sometimes it is important for my child's close friends that they don't feel like they're doing something wrong, or they're doing something that needs to remain a secret by seeing a therapist, and that if they want to reveal to their friends, and it's something that is connected to a conversation that they're talking about anyway, that it's kind of a normal thing, just like the child would say, yeah, I actually went to my pediatrician yesterday to get a checkup or to get tested for strep, that the child can say, I'm sorry, I can't make it to that game because I have my therapist appointment. That needs to be very different and totally allowed because of the unintentional consequences of making that child, as Svi said very well, feel like maybe they're doing something so secretive and maybe it's even wrong for them to be doing it. And rather that they can definitely speak about that they go to therapy and have therapy appointments, while at the same time starting the conversation with the Hanhala, the administration of the school, by saying, I get it, we have to make sure that there are limitations. Generally speaking, if it's approached that way, the school can hear it and the school can accommodate. I think the school can come around. That's what I've seen. You're muted.
Yep. It had to happen at least once in a Zoom that I would talk, right? All right. Any last questions anybody wants to put in the chat? And before we close our session today. Looks like we have. I want to just reiterate a couple of things. Number one, a tremendous thank you to Rabbi Gluck and Rabbi Landa. The work you're doing is really quite astounding, very impactful, very important. You should just continue and go from strength to strength. And it was really our privilege and our honor to be able to highlight the work you're doing. Emma Lash, wonderful presentation. We're so fortunate to have you in our local community and look forward to continue collaborating with you in other programs and events. Esti Schombrun, who again really worked closely with me and others to bring this program to life, and also cares passionately about addressing different aspects of mental health education in our community. And of course, Leah Scheininger, who spoke from the heart and made herself vulnerable in a way that benefits the rest of us and for the purpose of benefiting the rest of us, and also for starting Ben's Wellness. I would like to remind everyone again that they can reach out to Beaker Home of Greater Washington locally, in the same way that Rabbi Gluck said, the money is part of our holistic approach that we have to helping people. And there's many different things that people can use when they're struggling. There's all kinds of different types of mental health. There are crises, immediate crises. There are long-term issues that need to be worked on. Sometimes there's a certain degree of self-care that's needed for certain struggles that people are going through that may not fall into the category of a mental health diagnosis, but are having struggles, and some of the self-care or a short-term support that we can offer can really help them over the hump with that. We also are preventative in the sense that when people are struggling with physical illness or mental health illness, we can offer support in the back end, whether it's for dinners or food, volunteers, special help to prevent from falling into a hole that will be harder to dig out of. So I would like everybody to keep that in mind. And I also would like to remind everyone that this is a very big topic, and we addressed some aspects of it today, but we really do hope to continue to bring in you other programming throughout the year. We're also very open to suggestions. We will bring in people with different perspectives. We'll say slightly different things so that you can make your own judgments based on all the different voices that you get to hear. So I want to thank everybody very much for attending today. We will send a follow-up email. I will be in touch with Rabbi Gluck and Rabbi Landa from Amudim, so get what they would like to be included in that follow-up email as well, so you have the benefit of their resources. And you should look out for that within the next few days. I hope I'll see some of you on February 25th for the program on advanced directives. And thank each and every one of you for joining us today. I know it's a busy day and it meant a lot to me and to those of us at Beaker Home of Greater Washington that you took the time to come to this program and to stay with us throughout. Thanks so much. Have a good day, everyone.